Um, this is the story of Asta. See, this boy, he wasn't born in High Village. He was born, his mother, Likta, left him in a church next to another baby named Yuno, who was put there beforehand by another person. The guy who owned the church, the father took him in and raised them like they were his own sons. Asta was like a baby that was full of energy and, passion and, drive towards, whatever. Yuno was more quiet, silent, and, a little more shy. As they grew up, as these boys grew up, Asta was, older, a little bit older than Yuno, but not much, like a day or two, it don't matter. But Asta, was, kind of rambunctious, another thing. He had to help Yuno out. How to help Yuno, learn to be more like, tough, courageous, and not back down, from people who are, not good. And he learned that from Asta. He used to cry a lot. Sister Lily, who was also working at the church, how to take care of them. Asta always had a thing for older women, kind of like me. I kind of like that about him, but, not that. Because, he has a different personality than I do. She, like I said, he was stuck up for and other things when they were younger. And then as they got older, his powers manifested. He had wind magic. Asta had no magic, but he was still the same guy. He was still like, well, I can become Wizard King still. It didn't matter, and I still like Sister Lily and everything else. Episode 1, you see him as a fucking, annoying, fucking kid playing games, asking her, this and that, and then not just that, he's telling these other kids, he's gonna be the Wizard King, and they're like, well, there's no way if I'm, younger than you and I can use magic. Your magic usually manifests by a certain age, and you don't have that shit yet. At your age of 15, and Asta's like, it don't matter, I'll still become Wizard King, I'll prove you all wrong. And then at age 15, they all go and get their grimoires, right? So got his grimoire right away, and it wasn't just any type of grimoire, it was one of the, 4-leaf grimoire, a very, special one. Asta awakened his grimoire after a guy with chains was trying to attack. See, he wanted to attack, and Asta caught wind of it and was like, no, that's my brother and shit. I won't let you, fuck around with him. And he, tried to, defend against this guy, but the guy, kind of fucked his ass up. But the, 5-leaf grimoire, a black book, with the devil possessed in it, came forward, and it had a sword in it. He come to learn that this sword was anti-magical, so any magical item or any magic was nullified in its presence. So with that alone, it made him a real, it was a game changer for this guy. This boy, his whole life being told, he probably won't become a wizard and shit, and then he manifests his own book. It just has a sword in it that's anti-magic. He doesn't have spells and all that extra shit like all these other people, but it, cuts through magic and renders it useless. So he's, kind of OP with that. But he still has to learn how to, use the swords properly and other things. So then they go to the wizard, in the capital to become, magic knights. They expected that Asta would come home because, it might be cool that he has anti-magic, but like I said, he still has to work with it and other things. His whole life, he didn't have anything, just the work ethic. Basically, he would work out and do things every day, to make his body physically, strong enough. But, he still wasn't, physically strong enough. He still had a ways to go, is what I'm saying. Even had a ways to go, even with his grimoire and everything else. He went to the Golden Dawn, but then Yami came forward and was like, hold on, this boy right here, he showed some, interesting things. The anti-magic, that's interesting. I have a whole bunch of people in my Magic Knight squad who are weird, have weird magic, are weird people. Strange, they come from Forsaken Realm, from, lowly villages outside of the kingdom. Even I was, not from this country, and then I became a Magic Knight captain. He's a great fit. So then he joined the Black Bulls. His initiation ritual was done by, Magnus Swing, and Magnus Swing, he got his attack reflected back at him with the, God damn, I wish I knew what the swords were called. I used to, but the big ass sword that he first had, he swung the sword and it went back. And he has to wield that sword with two hands, of course. But then he, fought against some members of the Third Eye. These people were working to resurrect the elf clan. See, the elves were like wiped out a long time ago, and there was a group trying to resurrect them. They needed pieces of these different stones to do it. They wanted to resurrect Lick, their master. But there was the head guy of the Midnight Sun, Patri, who was, really, acting like Lick. Sent these people out to go retrieve these things. Asta was fighting against these people. He had to take down this guy who was, ice, used ice magic in this village. And they did that. Him, Noel, and Magnus Swing, they got that done. Then they went into a tunnel, cave. Now they had encounters with another, antagonist group. That's the Diamond Kingdom. This guy named Mars. See, they, did these experiments on people. And like these kids killed each other, and then, the most powerful kids kind of like stole the other kids' magic so they could use it. So Mars had ice magic, and he had, kind of like fire magic too. And he was fighting against and Asta. Asta had to help out with that one because he has anti-magic, and they were able to defeat him with the help of, Klaus and a girl that likes him. All these girls fall for Asta too. Mimosa. So that happens, and then they, eventually get to fighting one of the members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun in the Sea Palace. Because one of the stones was there, and they wanted to retrieve it before they did. Beto of Despair was there, and he was like fucking up his, Black Bull, squad mates. Magnus Swing and Luck went down to him, and then everybody else had to jump in too. Yami was watching from the sidelines for a little bit. Asta did go in and, give him a good fucking wallop with the sword eventually, thanks to Vanessa's strings and Finral's, portal magic, spatial magic. He got him there, and then he came down with the fucking sword like boom. And then, Yami hit him with the Equinox Slash too, and that was able to, defeat the guy. Then, his arms were cooked though, after that, I believe. After Asta got his arms, fucked up, and they sought help from the witch of the forest, the witch's forest. This girl, she, played games with other witches and stuff. Certain girls left the witch's forest because they were like, we don't like this girl. This woman plays games with us and says we have to, he calls to her and, stay in the forest and, fuck around how she says. And, this old bitch was playing games with us. And they wanted to like fuck around and stuff basically and like know the other, like just know life and stuff, and so they wanted to know life and stuff. So Yami took Vanessa a long time ago, because she was in a cage and shit, and he was like, nah, you gotta be with me, because that ain't right. I wouldn't want to live like that. And then another girl, I forget what her name was, but her husband knew Asta because before Asta, got his arms broken, he was, wandering in the forest and he found a guy. He was from the Diamond Kingdom. This guy knew wind magic, and he knew how to use a sword. He was teaching Asta swordsmanship, so he could, effectively use his anti-magic sword. So it, helped Asta out. But at this point, Asta was in need of help from the witch's forest, the queen, she had enough magic to heal his arms. So Vanessa was like, I'll take him there. I don't want to go there, but I will for Asta because he's my friend and I want to, help him out. Facebook friend. And then she went there and they all went there and he got his arms fixed. Then the Diamond Kingdom attacked. But at the same time the Diamond Kingdom was attacking, also the Eye of the Midnight Sun was attacking. And they were like, we'll be able to leave here and everything, we'll protect your force and everything else. You healed my arms and everything. And they did that. They fought against Fauna of Hatred. She was, it was interesting because Fauna was actually another girl too. There was two Faunas. One that was the elf a long time ago that reincarnated into the body of another woman named Fauna, who was also a Diamond Kingdom, magic knight. Mars knew her and he saw her and he was like, that's Fauna. I knew her. I killed her or she died. I was surprised to see her. And then Ladris is like, whatever, we are here to do other business, to fuck up this, this bitch's forth. And then the Eye of the Midnight Sun was there. Fauna had like a, inner turmoil with herself, but she had the power of Salamander. They had to fight against that together. Asta helped out with that, and then Ladris was there after they defeated Fauna, and Fauna was able to come back to herself because Asta used his anti-magic to get rid of her third eye, which got rid of the elf that was living inside of her for so long. He fought against Ladris, and that was a good fight too. Ladris was a guy who could absorb all kind of magic and become more powerful, and that's how his magic worked, because he was one of the kids that was in Diamond Kingdom who killed other people and then got their magical power too, and he had the ability to absorb other people's magic, but he took in a lot, and then Asta used his anti-magic to defeat him. And then the witch was like, I like this guy, I want to keep him here and control him and other things. But thanks to Vanessa awakening her ability on the String of Fate, Asta was able to get control of his body, and they defeated her. And then they left the forest. Scoffrey, she was just like, all right, get out of here. Whatever. You don't want to stay here, that's fine. She had to rebuild and all kind of shit anyway. So then they went. And they made moves to the kingdom got together and said, okay, well, we need to make a squad of all kind of magic knights, the best ones, so we'll fight and see who wants to become a magic knight for this coalition, because there's 9 magic knight squads, but they want the best mages from each magic knight squad to go and fight against the Eye of the Midnight Sun. So then Asta was fighting against, God damn, I'm trying to remember who he was fighting against. Were they fighting against Silva? No, that wasn't them. God damn, I'm trying to remember, because there was a lot of good fights in this part of the series. And Asta, I know what Asta did though. Asta fought against Ladris. Oh, not Ladris. Longris. That is what's his name's brother? That's Finral's brother. Finral almost died, and then he stepped forward with all the Black Bulls who was there. And Julius is like, all right, we don't have to fight like this. It'll be Longris versus Asta, and Asta defeated Longris. And then, later on, the hatred in his heart was then, used towards, elf manifesting inside of Longris. But that was him. And he was, and also was selected to be one of these magic knights that goes in to fight the Eye of the Midnight Sun. When they get there, though, Miraleona's leading the charge, and he's with Zora, and him and Zora are with Miraleona, and Miraleona comes up on the last guy, which is Raya the Disloyal, and he uses copy magic, and he was, copying everybody's spells and using it on her. But he and Asta just stood there and watched because he was told to, but then he went in and helped her because, she was fighting pretty well, but then See, Patri had defeated Julius and then got the little stone. So then they hit the stone and they were able to resurrect more elves. And then the elves that were already resurrected got their full power back. And they were like, okay. And then he called upon more elves to come fight against Merleona. And they were like, man, she's going to die. We need to pull this bitch out of the fight. She's a dumb bitch. Stupid ass hell. You know, we have to bring her, you know, so she don't kill herself. You know, and they grabbed her and they left. You know, and then after that, they went to the kingdom to, like, you know, see what the fuck was going on. Well, before that, actually, and Asta fought against the real Licht. His body was there, but, like, he wasn't fully manifested yet. Asta did have one of Licht's swords. See, Licht was an elf that used sword magic. So he called his sword back to him, and he was fighting against Asta and and he, you know, basically defeated them, but not really. They went and they were trying to, like, you know, reverse the effects of the elf reincarnation spell. Because even Luck got taken over by an elf. He helped out a couple of magic knights, Asta did, by hitting them in the head with a certain sword. I don't remember which sword it was now. I don't remember the names, but this one was able to, you know, absorb the magic that was, you know, affecting them and, you know, dispel that. And then he goes into their hideout, you know, whatever the fuck that was. It was like floating and other things. And they go in there and they witness that, you know, Patri, you know, gets betrayed by a devil named Zagred. See, Zagred was the one who manipulated everything the whole time. Even back how they told the story where the big ass demon attacked and then Lumiere, the first Wizard King, held down against it. It was because, you know, Zagred turned, you know, Licht into a demon because, you know, he had hatred in his heart, and that's what he fed on to manifest forward and everything else. He needed them to hate humans and everything else. You know, he's a devil, so he liked, you know, all the chaos that was ensuing and shit, and he was sprung forward. And then miasma comes everywhere and it starts, you know, fucking people up. Patri gets controlled by Zagred too, because Patri actually thought he was bringing his people back and it was going to be alright. You know, even like Asta knew though that something was up with the spell, because the elves, like, that were possessing these people were, like, losing control. All of them were. You know, when they, like, got to being, like, really hateful. You know, and the elves themselves weren't hateful, though. You know, it was the spell that was being used. You know, and Zagred was fighting against, you know, a lot of magic knights. You know, and Asta were some of them. After they defeated Patri, you know, Patri became good again. He came too because Asta went inside and told him to, like, calm the fuck down. You know, he had Lumiere and Licht also came to his side, and then, you know, Captain Yami was on the move too. Merleona was there and everybody. But then Asta was able to cut down Zagred with his anti-magic sword, but that led to problems later because Diamante was trying to, you know, get him, you know, fucked up, you know, because he used the power of a devil, and the devil was trying to destroy the kingdom. They didn't remember, though, that Asta is an anti-magic user, and his powers are not the same as Zagred, you know. And Zagred was the devil who was fucking with people, not Asta, but they didn't see it that way, you know. The royals heard about it, and they were, oh my god, that's not, he can't have that, you know. And they took him to the court, and they were like, you know, we probably see you as guilty because you have a devil living inside of your grimoire. You know, you are devil possessed. And he's like, well, I don't see it that way. You know, I'm here and I can, you know, help out. I ain't here to, you know, cause problems. You know, I'm a magic knight just like everybody else. And then Julius was kind of, you know, he was a child again because he used, like, the rest of his time magic to save himself. But he was like, yeah, you know, you gotta, like, ease off his dick and stuff. You know, he helped us out. Without him, we would have, like, not defeated the devil and shit in the first place. Diamante was riding their dick still. But thanks to, you know, Yami seeing it in the Asta, he came there and he was like, you know, if you want to take Asta, you'll have to take on all of us. And they were like, they weren't trying to have that go down. So then they like kind of put that shit on hold for like a later date. And then after that, they decided to train in, they trained in, the Diamond Kingdom. Or not the Diamond Kingdom, the Heart Kingdom. They went there and they were training. Asta trained with, who the fuck did he train with? I don't remember who he trained with, but he trained there for a while. And then, after a year or two, he came back to the, Clover Kingdom. He was faster, stronger, and everything. He could use a sword. Like, he could hold his sword with one arm. And he was running to, not the Diamond Kingdom, but the Spade Kingdom, because they were, like, enslaving people, draining their magic for, certain things. They were using slaves and other shit. And he was like, he came there and he saved those people. See, the Dark Triad was on the fucking move. That's the Zogratis siblings, 3 of them. Vanica went to the Heart Kingdom, and she was using the powers of Magicula to fight against Lolopeshka and old girl, you know who she is, Noelle. And then Xenon went to, Clover Kingdom, and he fought against, Vondas and the Golden Dawn, like killing most of the members and taking Vondas as well. Tried to get there and other things, but didn't work. However, Asta got there in time to stop Dante from destroying the Black Bulls and the hideout. He was like, okay, I'm here and I can fight against you, and they were fighting devil possessed, both of them were devil possessed. See, he had the powers of Luciferos, who had, is what Dante had. And he had body magic, but also gravity magic. And then Yami came there to help Asta out too. And they both fought side by side against this guy. They were fucking his ass up. But they needed a move to get them over the edge and like actually put the guy down. So he made a pact with Liba, and Liba was like, okay, I can let you use my power for 1 minute. And he was like, okay, yeah. And then in that 1 minute, Yami swung his sword to Asta, and then he, cut down Dante. Dante was cut down and on the floor, almost dead. Now, Yami was like gassed, and Asta was too. But then Xenon, he has spatial magic, not just bone magic. He comes through and he's like, okay, I'll take, Dante and Yami, because I need Yami to, create the, open the gates of the Tree of Cliffoth so they can, like, manifest the devils forward. So they can come out and other things and fuck shit up in the Spade Kingdom. And they were like, okay, well, Asta was like, well, Liba, well, he didn't know it was Liba yet, but he was like, devil, help me out. And he was like, no, I already helped you out. And then Yami got taken away. But then later on, Vice Captain Knot finally showed himself at the end of season 4. And he was like, I can teach you how to, a subjugation ritual, so you can get your devil to like submit to you, and you can use its power as you see fit. And he was like, all right, cool. And he took him down to, where the ritual is done. And then, he fought against Liebe with one arm and other things. But Liebe, remembered Lichta, because Lichta actually knew about Liebe. Liebe reminded Lichta, which is Asta's mother, of Asta, but she was like sad because she had to leave him, because her magic was like to drain other people's magic away. And then Liebe also ended up becoming a devil that could use anti-magic and like dispel other magic. Lucifero tried to manifest forward, and she was like, she died, trying to protect Liebe, essentially. And then he was sealed inside of that grimoire until Asta eventually, took hold of it. And he was like, this guy is kind of basically like my brother and shit. I have to like hold down with him and everything else. And then, the subjugation ritual was done, and then Asta was like, I ain't gonna like take full power, we'll have a 50-50 contract. So like, I'll ask you for, power and other things, I won't completely have control over you. I want you to still be Liebe, the guy you are. And he's like, all right, cool. And they, made a pact like that. And then that's what happened at the end of season 4. And now in season 5, whenever the fuck that comes out, They're gonna go to, Spade Kingdom and, run shit with, the Zogratis siblings and the devils that come from the Tree of Qliphotep and try to save Vengeance and Yami. That's what basically season 5 is gonna be about when it does come out, and whenever that is. I am excited for it too. But that's the story of Asta up until now, as told by Darius the Green Angel. So stay cool, call in the corner.